Hi, I'm Heather Telford and I have a watercolor floral card to show you today. I'm using brush markers from Karin from the 26 pack. I'm working on hot pressed watercolor paper from Fabriano, and I'm using this pretty new floral stamp from Penny Black. It's called Daydream. It's actually like the title stamp from the new Daydream release. Like you'd have a title track from an album. This is the title stamp. I'm going to start by spritzing the stamp with water and then stamping a water image on my watercolor paper. You'll see when I lift it up that I didn't clean the stamp expertly. It's still got a little bit of dark ink from the previous image I stamped, but that won't matter because I'll be filling all that space with color. To ink the stamp, I'm just using the markers on the edge of the stamp. This is going to define the perimeter of each flower, and then the water that's on the paper plus the water that I'm going to spritz on the stamp is going to fill the space in the petals. I'm adding gold to the center of some of the flowers where the seeds shown, and then I'm using a sepia, like a medium brown color for the stems. Before I stamp, I give the stamp another little spritz. I cover the side that I'm not working on at the moment, spritz it, and then stamp it. So not only is there water already on the paper, there's a little bit of water on the stamp, plus there's the ink border, which, as you can see, the ink from the border starts moving into the center of the petals of the flowers. So anywhere where that didn't happen, either there wasn't enough water on the stamp or the paper, I'm just adding the water with a paintbrush, and I'm using the paper towel just about on every petal because I want these petals to be pale. I don't want them to be as bold as the color of the brush marker. So I add a little water and then I absorb some of the water and ink back out again with a paper towel. That petal there on the large flower really didn't get much water at all, so I'm just going to spritz there and stamp again to just get a little bit more of that ink moving into water on the petal. The extra water helped a little, but I'll finish it off with my brush. You can see that some of the little flower heads I just leave as they are. The combination of the outline of ink, the spritzing of water just gives a suggestion of petals, and that's all I want. I don't want it to be really like photorealism or anything. I just want it to be kind of washy and impressionistic. Now I'm working on the second side of this stamp. I didn't do it all at once because if I spritzed the whole stamp with water and stamped that on the paper, by the time I got around to putting ink on the last flower, the water would have dried a bit on the paper. So I thought it was better to work on one side at a time. And you can see I've sped up the footage on this second side, but you can see I'm not really careful with the marker as I outline. I just want ink around the outside, the perimeter of the flower petals, because that defines the shape of the flower. If I did it just in the center and then stamped that into the water that's on the paper, then I wouldn't know exactly where the edges of my flowers were. So this helps me, just gives that little bit of blue to every petal, but then I can blend it in towards the center of the flower with a brush. And you can see the shapes of the flowers, but yeah, in that impressionistic kind of loose, watery style that I really enjoy. You can see that some of the yellow ink blended into the purpley blue as well, kind of giving it a bit of an olivey green color. I don't mind that as long as I've got some bold, well, not bold, but bright yellow in the centers. I don't mind having that blend of olivey green around there. I think that adds to the interest in the flowers. And I decided not to have a green for the stems because I knew I'd get a green from that blend of blue and yellow, so having a brown for the stems was a bit more neutral. I'm really enjoying stamping with these Karin markers. You can see how juicy they are. Even though I just did the rims of all those flower petals, there was more than enough color to blend in to fill the whole petals and the flowers. In fact, I could have used even less color and got even paler flowers. I'm drying the whole panel now because I've got one more color to add and I don't want it to bleed at all. I'm just adding dots in black to the centers of some of those flowers, and I don't want the black to bleed into the yellow. I want that yellow to stay bright where it's bright and not be dulled by some black. So those little dots can just sit on top and add a little more definition to the centers of the flowers. To finish the card, I decided to do a die cut sentiment. This is a new die from Penny Black, and I'm using the Wendy Vecchi art station to just keep everything still and lined up so that I can get these letters lined up. The die is thanks and hello, and it cuts out the letters individually in this lovely font, but they're individual, so when I'm sticking them back on, I've got to get them all lined up, and that's where the board and the magnetic rulers come in. I can line up my card front, line up the ruler with the grid, and then just glue those letters on one at a time. I've gone back to some of my glue pens and given them another chance because I have challenges with glue, and the glue pens seem to be working. So there are 3 layers of die cuts there. I stacked them up off camera and then just glued them all down. I didn't film all of that. I wanted to save you from the tedium of watching me glue. It's not a pretty sight. But here I am finishing with, me, a little bit of splatter. I've just scribbled the marker on an acrylic block, added some water. I'm protecting the die cuts because I don't want splatter on them, and then just tapping some of that diluted blue ink onto the panel. To finish off the card, I've added 2 layers of cardstock to the back to just lift it up. You could use foam tape or a piece of foam. I'm just using cardstock because it does a good job. It keeps it rigid, but also I've got lots of scraps of cardstock that are good for this. I really like a slightly raised panel. It just gives a little bit of a shadow without adding the boldness of a colored mat. So I often finish my cards this way. Thanks for joining me. If you'd like to learn more details about this card, you can check out my blog, and all the supplies are in the description box below.